and welcome to the podcast. I'm Nupur and joining me today is Jan Winterhalter, a German lawyer and a doctoral student. Welcome, Jan, to the podcast.
Hi there, I'm so happy to be there. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming. We will be pondering today on some questions regarding the value chain of digital businesses and the role of intangibles in the value chain of digital businesses. The moot questions around are intangibles overvalued? Jan and I published a paper in 2021 where we analyzed value creation and value chain of data businesses, where we discussed on a hybrid model which comprises of a mixture of qualitative and quantitative value chain to allocate the residual profitability to different jurisdictions based on the key factors of the data ecosystem and underlying key data function. The focus was more on enterprise value chain. Jan recently published a paper with Mariam and Lukas where they mentioned or discussed that intangibles are overvalued in digital businesses or more so in digital economy, and one should also take into account the role of other factors like, for example, human labor, resources, data. They undertook empirical research about which Jan will be sharing a bit today. They have looked beyond the enterprise value chain as it appears today and tried to go into the sources of value creation and thereby economic allocation of profit beyond the enterprise. A value chain of the digital economy, including a comprehensive analysis of the value chain with bottom-up approach and less of the top-down approach. Coming to our first question, in your recently co-authored paper named The Physical Human-Driven Digital Economy, the overvaluation of intangible and its effect on tax and society, it is mentioned intangibles are currently overvalued, as we also said earlier, due to an understanding focusing on specific key driver but not on a comprehensive analysis of digital economy. Jan, can you elaborate more on your findings in the paper?
Yeah, sure. Thanks again for having me. So what we argue basically is that the digital economy is far from virtual or ephemeral. It's not driven only by intangibles. The value chain of the digital economy deeply builds on resources, data, and above all labor. There is no genius from the cloud, no magical algorithm. So when you look at the physical and personal resources you actually need to build those systems, and also platform systems, which are not self-driving cars, and you're not only looking at the key value drivers and the intangibles, then you understand that this perception of the intangible driven digital economy, so patents and trademarks are the only value adding or the most value adding factor. That this perception, let us kind of believe that the digital economy is only intangible driven, but it is not. This narrative of progress and focus on new inventions and technologies is in a way a technological determinism. This could block the view to the outside world in a way that you have of all everywhere around you smart system surrounding digital services, but you need factors that are necessary to actually build, provide, and maintain them. And this perception could block your understanding of the digital economy, that intangibles are perceived as highly valuable, which they are in a way, but the value chain is also created based very much on the routine functions along the value chain. This is what we are actually trying to say and argue. The digital economy is physical and human driven as well, and we have to look at those factors, at those routine functions as well.
Thanks, Jan. My question now to you is, don't you think that when we do value chain of the organization, the factors which you are mentioning, the human factor or other sort of resources, those are already taken care in the value chain analysis of the company? And OECD has also put greater reliance on value creation, like aligning profit with the value creation in action 8 to 10. But yes, there was some missing elements, and that's why we are now discussing upon allocation to market jurisdiction in Pillar 1. But still, what do you think that whether value chain of the organization would cover the factors which you are trying to bring in and say that these factors are not given enough importance?
Look, obviously we are not the first to try to define the digital economy. This has been on the agenda of so many researchers for decades. We shifted our focus on intangibles, which is also not completely new, right? Because we all know that they play a very important role at the beginning and the end of the value chain. Beginning with R&D, and the end rather for marketing, branding, sales, and customer service. And the study is referring to the problem of overvaluation of intangibles because they are very easy to allocate to low tax jurisdictions and are hard to value. Those studies have referred to the problem that is not completely new. We know that intangibles are particularly mobile and can be assigned to those low tax jurisdictions. And we are not the first, right? We talk about the general mode of production of the value chain, the specific business models, but we tried to base our framework on Crawford and Jola, and they point out in their anatomy of AI that there are kind of invisible layers of digital infrastructure we usually do not think about that much when we think about the digital economy. When we think, when we followed the OECD report from 2015, the digital economy was described as an economy driven by intangibles. And everyone knows that intangibles play this very important role at the beginning and the end of the value chain. Beginning rather with R&D, in the end rather for activities such as marketing, branding, sales, etc., etc. And there are a thesis that we have this overvaluation of intangibles because they are very easy to allocate to tax havens and very hard to value due to a lack of comparables. So we did not, start a completely new definition of the digital economy. The OECD did it in its 2015 report, and they laid the foundation for the common understanding of how we perceive how value is created. And they're saying, well, it's kind of based on intangible driven, on a scale without mass and user participation. But we follow a framework which was developed by Crawler and Crawford. And what they say, well, we have to look at behind the screen, behind the invisible layers of the digital infrastructure. We argue that there are kind of supply chains behind this engines of extractivism, behind neural networks or algorithms, behind interfaces, which we need to analyze. And there's a lot of labor we are not thinking too much about. And that is what we think that, let's say, let's go with the use case of Amazon maybe and its Alexa system. So Amazon selling its ecosystem brand of smart speakers, those devices connected to a virtual private assistant, a smart service in the way. And the question arises, how do you develop, produce, implement, maintain such a service? And the first association might relate to the underlying innovative technology developed by R&D, and maybe also the scale network effect, which gives you this competitive advantage. The data extracted, analyzed, and used, it's kind of the new oil by skilled data analysts or data management. So, of course, the patent making possible Alexa sounding now like a family member. Maybe you think about the huge network of data centers, fiber connections, the necessary land use. But we make the point that much fewer associations might relate to the resources as well as the energy needed to run the digital economy, such as raw materials for hardware manufacturing. And the same is true, of course, for the data input of the users that will be added to the existing set of training data buffer when something is misunderstood. But even there we go further and we argue, and we are not the first one, we try to integrate it within the international tax system, that people are likely to consider less the human workers, checking the misclassifications, correcting, re-adding them to the training set, other click workers, gig workers, cloud worker, ghost worker, however you want to call them, record a certain command, transcribe existing voice records, clean the whole platform system, or the pre-data analysis, the data annotation, the data structure happening behind the screen before the big data analysis can happen actually. So, and now back at the system of transfer pricing. Now methods have to be applied to determine the prices, meaning we have to find this accurate price for the function of such a data acquisition, storage, and analysis, data usage within the Amazon. And of course, we say intangibles play a major role for BEPS, and they can generate a significant portion of the value. But this significant portion of the value coincides with the fact that they are mostly created by mayperson in Global North. To say what we actually call AI, many other significant value contributions are also required. So we talked about the minerals, the manufacturing, but also the data preparing, labeling process, which is driven by hundreds of thousands of crowd workers. What we argue is now, those are the resources, labor and data you actually need, not only the key value driver. And within the value creation, we could not find this moving or looking behind the screen in the general approach within transfer pricing. It has not been discussed so far, as far we have understood, within the OECD, which is a huge problem.
Yeah, I understand the difference you are trying to make. So even if we think about the entire pillar one proposal that is more about allocation to the market jurisdiction, so what you are trying to bring into account is the backward integration, not only the demand side, but also focus on the supply side. And then supply side should not be ignored. So we do allocate, especially for the routine function, say we take cost plus markup. So what point you are trying to make, which seems to me, is that routine functions should be broadly analyzed, and it's not just that it should be always allocated cost plus markup. That would be the right analogy for it. Some of the routine function also plays a prominent role in the way how the businesses develop. My question to you would be, we have been discussing earlier about fractional apportionment method. Even we had some proposal around where people were saying that you can allocate some weight to different factors on purchase side or supply side, and then you can take some important factors like resource, people, data, what you are trying to bring. Do you think some sort of fractional apportionment method where these factors which you are trying to bring in from the supply side, if added, could resolve an issue?
Well, what we did was we followed basically the traditional approach of a functional risk analysis and a value chain analysis, as it is more or less proposed by the actual system, the most recent system we have at the moment. What we tried was to find a way within the system we are living in today, the transfer pricing system, and think about if we can already actually implement those hidden activities within the system. A fractional apportionment, of course, could also work in a way, but as always, it's a completely different methodology and has its downsides and its upsides. I'm not completely against it. It's going into this direction of Pillar 1, for instance, or the residual profit split methodology is very much based on a fractional apportionment method. But of course, if you're following this fractional apportionment method, you can integrate it within, let's say, labor or assets. Although here, the same problem arises as always. You have to determine a kind of a price, a value at least, if we're talking about assets, for instance. Regarding labor, you have somehow to determine this price either with comparables, with costs, or with another methodology we can basically choose from whatever methodology you want.
Yeah, I completely agree, because even the digital business models are coming in different variant. We even cannot imagine the business model that comes around. And then even if we try to integrate supply side factors, which you have brought forward, and some countries did do that by giving some weights to supply side when they were proposing fractional apportionment. The problem that lies is that it will always be a subjective approach. The weight will be assigned based on some subjective criteria, and that weight may not align with all digital business model. So yes, I understand your point, but coming to another point, what Steph, Yuan and I did in one of the write-ups way back in 2020, we identified different value generating function and the activities in relation to those functions performed by the M&E internally, and the activities where third parties are involved. Third parties, like it could be suppliers, some factors which you are saying could be contractors. We then try to allocate weight to these value generating activities, along with the role of different actors, the actors who are playing role within the M&E and the external party or the third party. And then we try to allocate some weight against in the star chart based on the actors of the M&E or external actors and the role or contribution in all the value generating activity. And we try to allocate some profit to different jurisdiction based on that analysis. This is what we were proposing. And when we try to compare that with the result of pillar 1, we were trying to see what variation would we get if we compare that with pillar 1 analogy. But I was thinking that could that sort of model work, like if not fractional apportionment, yes, a straightforward single fractional apportionment method may be subjective for all the digital business model. Suppose if we say that let's assign 20% of weight to asset, that might not be correct for all the digital business model. Yeah, but let's assign say 20% weight to significant people, but maybe we are moving from significant people function to significant digital presence in digital economy. That might also not be completely true for all the business. So is it like we have to analyze for each business model like we do the value chain in more detail, and then assign in the value chain also consider some factors coming from backward integration which you are trying to bring forward, and then do assign some weights to them, or do consider a more broader value chain when we do a broader value chain analysis of the organization?
I think the last point you made is aligned with our thought experiment, that it want to expand what we understand when we talk about the digital economy, that we should not base our analysis strictly transaction based, not strictly isolated consideration for individual transaction, more to identify, assess the situation within the M&E group. You have to familiarize with the M&E group, the value chain, value network, value shop. The complete value chain analysis has to be carried out. And I think when you go back where we started defining the digital economy, how it was be conducted before you were starting with the B2B, B2C, and then you expanded the idea because you understood where there are other actors you have to consider, you have to integrate within your system. Then we talked about the data ecosystem, for instance. So we thought about all those data actors you mentioned before, all those other personnel within an M&E, but also outside, which are working together to form this ecosystem to finally generate value within this value shop or value analysis. And what we try to do here is we want to be more precise, more concrete, and said, well, it is not just this one key actor. This key actor consists of more personnel, more resources. We try to actually atomize it very much more. So because the problem which arises then all the time, that if you only think about one key actor, you usually allocate the profit to this significant people function, which we call it in transfer pricing. And I think this is a problem, because you could at least allocate a portion of this profit arising from the intangibles, allocate to routine function as well, because they are part of this network, of this platform system. They are a necessary part. You cannot think a platform system without them. They contribute, and therefore we should allocate more profits to them. So because then this idea of when we are establishing a permanent establishment or not will not end, because we always say, well, the profit is so low, we would allocate to them. It's not worth it to establish now this permanent establishment, for instance. That will not happen, because we say, well, the profit should be, or the profit margin should be higher, cost plus should be, well, of course we can use it more, or we can keep on doing it, using it more, but then we have to consider that a cost plus methodologies is a very isolated approach, which does not work anymore for those systems which are not strictly hierarchically organized, but more decentralized. When we're talking about mobility of capital and labor, we have we have to somehow integrate it within our value chain analysis. And if more and more routine functions or more functions in general are decentralized, and we do not have this strict differentiation between routine, non-routine, but a lot of hybrids in between, then we have to rethink if they're only if it's right to say, well, they're only key value driver and the rest, because I don't think this makes so much sense for the digital economy anymore.
Yeah, I understand the point you are trying to make, but you see that all the MNEs have a lot of captive entities in different jurisdictions, and then these captive entities say functions like HR, finance, these are sort of non-value added function. I would not say completely non-value added function, but let's say put it like a non-routine, it's a routine function. Now, of course, the normal methodology that is followed for this function is cost plus markup. But the point you are trying to make is look beyond this and see that if more needs to be allocated to that jurisdiction. Do you think that this will create a lot of burden if something in this direction is brought forward? Because handling so many captive entities and then going for, say, more of profit split method or some other sort of transfer pricing method for seeing what sort of profit should be allocated to them, and in the end, the result which you will try to achieve with cost plus or the other methodology may tend amount to be same or in similar direction. So do you think or what do you think could be a way forward if you say that yes, routine functions are not properly profits are not apportioned properly to the routine function? What would be your solution or thought process in mind to bring some solution that is easy to be implemented or some easy way out through this?
So I think the root of thought goes that we try to stay within the system. We try not to develop a new pillar approach or a new formula which heals the world, or a completely new system. We try to stay within the actual system to avoid as many fractions and fragmentation of the different tax system as possible. And as we are living in globalization and more and more cross-border trades and services, one way has been always standardization and simplification of the rules. So referring to cost plus, we could think about standardized margins. Now I'm thinking about all those margins. For instance, we already have for low value adding services. Can also think about pooling of transactions of one permanent establishment, that we do not have to look at every of each transactions, but kind of can pool and put them together and then accurately determine the value of them. We can simplify also transfer pricing routes. Those amendments to the actual system has been proposed by different authors in literature. So I think that there are a lot of different ways to do it. In the end, of course, we have always to ask ourselves if we find the right balance between this consistency between value creation and taxation, but also that tax authorities are able to control those activities, control those this specific form of how business is conducted, also to allocate it and to locate it, to avoid conflicts between the different tax authorities, to avoid base erosion and profit shifting. The thing is, and now I'm coming back to what I said in the beginning here, is there a better way? I don't know. I don't see it in the pillar 1 or pillar 2 approach at the moment, because it's developing a lot of bureaucracy and staying within the system and trying to integrate more of the digital economy, reallocating profit in a way might be a first step in the right direction. I think a better step than pillar 1, pillar 2.
Yeah, thank you. That was indeed a great thought process and good to listen to your thoughts. Coming to the next question, since we touched on value chain and the role of different actors in the value chain, let's discuss a bit on the empirical study that you guys have undertaken in the paper. Can you elaborate on the methodology followed for the workshop or the empirical study and what result you got thereof?
Yes. So there are already some scholar support our thesis that intangibles are overvalued above on the field of international taxation because, again, there's a high focus on intangibles. But also in the field of management, economics, intangibles of big tech companies are not considered to be overvalued, but rather undervalued. So with this physical, human-driven digital economy as a starting point, we asked experts from the digital economy, what do you need to develop, maintain, sell Amazon ecosystem? So we kind of conduct an explorative study, an expert study with our focus group. And we asked what kind of personnel, of resources, capital and labor do you need to build those systems, to, for instance, build an ecosystem? Because what we really wondered was, will they say we need only intangibles, people who are from R&D, or do they also think about the machinery, equipment, like the servers, cloud and edge computing, the personnel, not only in logistics, but also in the data analytics, so data annotations, and the pre-data analysis, all those, call them Potemkin workforce. So workforce you do not think about immediately, but who is rather working in behind the screen. But our research indicate that experts kind of overrate or overvaluate intangibles to the disadvantage of tangible capital and labor. So how do we do it concretely? We, as I said, we set up this quasi-experimental setup, and we conduct a workshop regarding the regulation of the digital economy. So invited the actors from society, academia, private, public, with their specific expertise in the field of the digital economy. And they were assessed to assign, evaluate, validate aspects of value creation to the value creation stages of those different stages of data acquisition, data storage, analysis, and data usage for this Amazon ecosystem, which we used as a use case from the digital world. It's kind of a paradigm of the digital economy. And the evaluation was carried out twice, so once considering only value creation aspects commonly associated with the digital economy, and once including this broader set of aspects following the concept of extractivism, that the digital economy is also human and physical driven. And our results show that experts did not necessarily share, this whole extractivism and routine functions undervalued idea in its entirety, not really. But the results show that when confronted with a more holistic idea of the value chain of the digital economy, as they understood it, participants reduced the value assigned to intangibles in favor of aspects related to all this work done by humans, or to say in other words, labor significantly gains at the expense of capital, with a stronger effect for tangibles than for tangibles. So participants kind of shifted their understanding. And the idea from this workshop was, or the side we derived from it, was then, well, they kind of changed it because they overvalued in the beginning and then they reevaluated, and this difference makes us argue that there is this kind of overvaluation, which is, we think, based on a perception of the digital economy that is purely digital driven or mostly digital driven, but forgets all those other factors which have to be included within the value chain analysis. And if you transfer those results to transfer pricing, the same might happen within a transfer pricing, that when you have to determine the price, that you might feel for this kind of a bias because all those functions like global south or performed by other people than yourself, and you are thinking about the digital economy again from the key value driver side, but its perspective that there are other functions necessary to actually build those systems, to maintain them, and to implement them. This understanding, I don't know, maybe it is there, but it doesn't play a role, or it's not there at all. That I don't know. We cannot derive those insights. But what we do know for sure is that the understanding shifted. And I think this alone is kind of a thing which let us rethink how we should perceive the digital economy. Because if you reshift your understanding, then what happens with the next transfer price you have to determine? Is it then again completely new because you have gained a new understanding? It's, as I said, subjective, or not only subjective, but very, very dynamic. And I think that is something we have to consider for the next steps of taxation of the digital economy.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the understanding shifted, yes. So mainly the entire limb focus on digital economic presence, digital significance presence, with all unilateral digital levies coming upon, and then countries saying that companies have some sort of digital presence, but there is no people function or no labor, so no profit is allocated to that jurisdiction. So taxation regimes should shift from people function to digital presence or some sort of other function, because in digital economy alone, that significant people presence or those sort of factors may not work.
Yes, I think scale without mass is irritating and misleading. It's not how it works. If in order to reach a market and open it up for your own advantage, you actually have to establish a form of boot on the ground, a physical footprint in form of labor and physical machinery, and that counts for all bigger M&Es. It is simply not that you can develop a market without all those functions which are physical and human driven. Of course, depends on the business model, maybe social media is a little bit different to e-commerce, but even for social media, you have all those 100,000 of people whose task is to hygiene the platform, all those cleaners who are maintaining the order on Facebook or on Instagram. And I think that is a thing, or the customer service, or the service which is focused on the location specific factors and circumstances. So I think those functions, because we do not think about them too much. I think everything is happening in the headquarters in Silicon Valley. Maybe there are some regional centers, because we have very, very centralized understanding of digital economy. I think this is a problem. And this problem, I think, is not getting us further, because or this understanding is not getting further, because when you think about all those movements proclaiming that we have kind of a decentralization, I mean, what other words are there for blockchain than decentralization? So the people are still there and they're developing products, but they are very, very much decentralized, organized in a very decentralized way. And I think this is happening for M&E after COVID, even more, home office or vacation and so on. All those digital nomads, all of them are, problem of the same phenomenon, that we have. You have had a higher mobility of capital, but for mobile capital in form of intangibles, and now you have more mobility of labor as well. And this mixture, I think, is a problem. And of course, we can talk about over excess profits and how to tax them, but I think it's okay to stay within the system, because we can also already find a way to tax those routine functions. But we have to kind of shift our focus away from only that there's one headquarter and only routine functions, or this routine, non-routine. I don't think it makes sense. I'm not even sure if it makes sense before. It has been criticized before, not only the first one, but specifically for the digital economy. I don't think, or I think it's a very wrong understanding.
So you are trying to say that tangibles are used for the creation of intangible. Hence, the tangible factors should also be properly compensated, and these tangible factors are not always routine function, and even if they are treated routine function, following cost plus analogy may not be correct approach always. I think this is the point you are trying to bring forward. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, well, and it's not only tangibles, we argue, of course, the tangibles, like also automated machinery, should be partly proportionally in a way allocated to routine functions. Might be more bureaucracy in a way, but again, then you have standardization and simplification, which can help. But also intangibles, I'm not even saying, we don't dare to say that intangibles are not key value drivers in this way. We wouldn't dare to, but we say, well, routine functions play part in developing, maintaining them. So this is the whole idea of the damper functions within the OECD brought forward, that you have all those. And I think that's the right way to go. So this is also a basic understanding of our thesis. We only try to concretize, make it more precise, and argue, well, if you follow this approach of, say, damper functions, what does it mean for a digital economy? So if you look precisely at them, so data annotation, for instance, or this whole pre-data analysis, that is what we try to say, that routine functions also have to take part within the allocation for intangibles as well.
Do you say that you feel that DEMPE is not working properly because by DEMPE we are ending up over allocating or value to the intangible?
I'm afraid it is not, although I couldn't state it because DEMPE has only been introduced recently and is now coming into place, and we see in the future how it will work out. But this perception of digital economies remains at the moment. I think we have to change it in a way to better identify DEMPE functions and allocate proper profits accordingly. So I think it's the first step in the right direction, but we always have to talk about what we mean when we talk about digital economy and what activities contribute to the value.
And definitely,
I think,
yeah, definitely. I think that even some authors have criticized that DEMPE may not work well for all digital model, and especially the way Web3 economy is coming across. People are criticizing that DEMPE may not be the right synchronym for allocation of profit to the intangible, and there may be requirement of some other factors to be considered in the DEMPE function. Do you think, Jan, that excess profit tax could cover some parts of the problem statement you are trying to make?
Definitely. I think the taxation of the digital economy, or the problem with it, has been from the beginning and is still the overvaluation of intangibles. I think that has been the main problem. Not that we do not know the part of the user creation, or we do not integrate it within our system, the user participation, or the scale without measure. I think intangibles are the key here. And if we can value intangibles properly, or at least do not undervaluate routine functions where we usually do allocate intangibles less, then we might not have those problems with the excess profit tax. Because again, it's twofold. First, you can actually establish a permanent establishment, so an anchor point, a nexus for a profit allocation to market resource jurisdictions, because there are physical boots on the ground. And secondly, well, you can allocate them more profits. By doing that, I think the profit usually shifted to low tax jurisdiction. It's getting lower and lower, and you do not have the problem that you find all this profit ending up in tax havens, and gives you this competitive advantage. The hope here is we have not conducted an analysis in this way, that we have measured the economic impact, but it should be similar to Pillar 1, that Pillar 1 is not needed anymore because you already allocate the profits accordingly and you do not need this formulaic apportionment for the biggest profit-seeking players anymore.
Yeah, even if taking your analogy or the proposal which you are trying to make, suppose even when pillar one goes through, we have amount A and B, then I'm just broadly thinking that if one has to go to your to the analogy you are trying to make of focusing more on supply side factor, maybe then we need to look into some amount C where excess profit could be allocated to supply side factors such as tangible property, labor, or some other factors which you did mention in this paper.
Absolutely. We are only proposing a few, solutions, but I think what you try to do in our analysis, or in this paper at least, was giving a new understanding of the digital economy, this new critical thinking that we always have to rethink what we understand about the digital economy. Finding better solutions within transfer pricing is an art, right? As it is transfer pricing in itself. And I think amount B, for instance, is a very good step in the right directions, because there is a lot of standardization. And if we do not need pillar one in the way of amount A, for instance, in general, I am doubtful, but this is rather now not the discussion about what might be the best normative way or the best way to introduce this without many barriers, but rather a political question. And if
Definitely.
we follow the process, then we go with pillar one.
Coming to the last question, what impact does an overvaluation of intangible have for society, on the perception of digital economy, its organization, its key value driver, its functioning, for international law, international tax, and transfer pricing, in a sense, in a broader way? Of course, we have covered bits of part earlier, and irrespective of transfer pricing also, we have seen valuation topic also, we have seen in the past that companies have paid huge lump sum valuation to loss-making companies just because they had some form of intangible, say data or other sort of asset which they thought it can generate value. So what is your perspective on this topic from an overall perspective?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we covered some aspects where we analyzed the subsequent rise of intangibles, like what Husk and Wessel described. And we argue that this could have several repercussions. So, of course, a rise of base erosion and profit shifting in tax realm, because easy to allocate, hard to value, that's not new. But we also argued that this rise of inequalities, or there could be a rise of inequalities between states and people, or states and states, rise in distorted and misled investment decisions in big tech, and simply is this wicked understanding of this economy and the perception of this narrative of progress. So a consistent rise of highly valued intangibles might lead to a higher return on investments dominated by intangible capital, tangible driven economy like the tech industry. So this could create new inequalities between capital and labor again. So this old question. So a possible overvaluation of intangibles might very much accelerate this process. Another point we're trying to make is that this overvaluation and rise of intangibles can contribute to stabilize, increasing the monopolistic tendencies which are inherent to the digital economy, which has been covered by other literature, which are saying, well, intangibles are a factor to monopolize the market. And well, in general, if we assume that intangibles are overvalued at the cost of other aspects, such as labor, resources, data, so the question arises, how can we invest even in companies if one does not have a comprehensive analysis of the value chain above all regarding ESG criteria, environmental, governmental, or societal aspects can or have to be included within the value chain. Not at the moment within the actual system, but there are authors in literature who suggest that we, maybe develop a new factor, which is a completely new thing, but a new factor of sustainability factors next to function risk analysis. And this is something we have to consider either for investment or within the tax realm. And And I think, again, this whole process of the narrative of progress and the transformation of the digital economy, it's not completely wrong, right? We do not argue against completely, but we have to be careful, because you always need human and physical elements to actually develop and maintain and implement those systems. That is what we're trying to make. You need resources, data, and labor within the value chain. You have to consider them within tax realm, within investment decisions. Only then, I think, a lasting, convincing line of argumentation can be establishment in the context of an audit or general.
Understood. So you are saying more on the holistic value chain, and regarding the holistic value chain, that can comprise of not only qualitative and quantitative value chain of the enterprise, but even looking a bit beyond the enterprise and thinking what are the factors that are contributing to the ecosystem, which we also brought forward in our paper, but we were talking there more on data ecosystem. Here you are trying to focus more on the entire digital ecosystem, and the factors that contribute to the entire digital ecosystem should also play some bit of role in the enterprise value chain, and that should also be factored in.
Well, in a way, we already try to factor it in by saying that we have this kind of network effect.
Yeah.
At the moment, we only have the personal data or the enterprise data, which can be assigned to as an intangible to different functions or principles or non-routine functions. But yes, of course, at the moment they're only considered as economic factors, but maybe those factors are not only location-specific advantages, also the synergy effects of the aligned enterprise. Maybe those are factors we should rather consider as intangibles, but also before creating a new rise of BEPS, try to align them to routine functions as well, because again, they contribute to those aspects as well to develop them in the first place. So yes, we could think about it, but first I think we always have to try to not look in an isolated way at the digital economy or the value chain of the specific business model, but rather, as you said, try this comprehensive but also modular analysis of the value chain with, as you said in the beginning, with less top-down but bottom-up approach.
Yeah. And the point you are trying to make around network effect, sustainability, even like in some of the session, I was asked the same question. And then, yes, there are papers on valuation topic also where people have discussed how these factors could be taken into account while valuing a company, either through discounted cash flow or other sort of valuation methodology. And like network effect, some people argue that, okay, if the company has benefit of network effect, the same will flow through the user's prediction. So there is an analogy where in these discounted cash flow method, where instead of focusing on the revenue, you focus how many users will grow per year to year, and then you figure out how much revenue will grow per the increase in the user and retention in the users. So yes, there are theories around it, and many people have tried to do some sort of valuation around network effect or bringing in sustainability factors. So even in then it makes sense, the argument which you are trying to make, that why not bring that to even tax arena in the value chain when we do the value chain for transfer pricing purpose or other purposes.
Absolutely. And regarding network effect, so what I want to emphasize is that the network effect is not happening just because of the algorithm. The scaling is not happening without mass. There was always people or machinery equipment, so tangible capital behind the screen to develop this system. That is, I think, the major point we're trying to make. So even for this network effect, which we rather perceive as something, well, kind of a part of a sort of a location specific advantage, I think to create a network effect, you also need people on the ground, machinery, equipment, etc. So that is, I think, something new, and we have to talk about it in the future. What we're trying to emphasize in our paper is regarding the network effect, that it is not happening without the use of labor and data and resources. I think this is the major point we're trying to make here, that you cannot create a network effect without physical and human materialities. So this is a reality we try to, kind of change this perception, because it's not happening just out of nothing or just based on a algorithm run on a service in Silicon Valley. That you need something to develop it, to create it, to maintain it, and that is something we try to bring forward. This whole idea, which I think might help us for the future to better understand the modern digital economy as it will fall out in the future.
Thanks, Jan, for sharing your thoughts. Thanks all